A very good morning to all of you. I welcome you all to Ansarkari. So let's start with today's analysis. So that is going to be for 25th of February. So we'll be looking into the Northeastern India, how the economy of Northeastern India has been changed, and what are the social changes that have taken place, what initiatives have been taken for the development of Northeast India. Then we'll be looking into the toxic air pollution because of the Chandrapur Power Plant and many allegations of violations that have been leveled against it. So, orangutans, they have been smuggled via Chennai, and 4 policemen have been suspended. So, at least 8 orangutans, they have escaped through Chennai. And apart from that, you need to find out more about orangutans, and if you don't know, so you need to also look at the pictures. How do they look? And so the smugglers, they bribed some of the police personnel. Obviously, corruption is one of the reasons. And orangutans, they are critically endangered species. So their IUCN status is critically endangered. They are native to the rainforest of Malaysia and Indonesia. So their habitat, and they are found in the rainforest. So in the context of India, you can find them either in the northeastern India or in basically Western Ghats, but you need to find out specific states where they are found in India. So its center's call, says the Supreme Court, over the menstrual leave policy. And petitioner can approach the Ministry of Women and Child Development, says the Supreme Court bench, which also flagged the concern that such leave can act as disincentive for those who want to hire women. And there are different dimensions to this issue. We will leave it to the policymakers, let them first formulate a policy, and we'll consider it then. So this is obviously coming from the judiciary. So obviously the policy first needs to be formulated by the central government, needs to be passed by the parliament if there is an act that is upcoming regarding all of this, and then it would be taken up by the judiciary if there is an issue, and petition would be filed over that. So one thing is that it might be a disincentive for those who want to hire women, that obviously they will have to give them leave every month. So considering that, it might disincentivize them from hiring women, and would also impact the share of women in the employment sector and also their labor force participation rate. So looking at this picture coming from Delhi and MCD house, so highly disrespectful, and there are no words when we look at such situations happening. People are fighting, people are beating each other. So this is not what we mean by healthy democracy, and this is exactly not the message that we want to put out globally. So the jurist and the ex-civil servant says that the institutional bias, hatred of minorities is enabling the riots. So journalists, retired jurists, and former civil servants at an event, they said that the institutional bias in Delhi police and rising hatred towards the minority communities were to blame for the rise in the communal clashes. So to mark the 3 years since the Northeast Delhi's riot, so a series of panel discussions took place at Uncertain Justice, which was a program organized by the Constitutional Conduct Group. So it is an organization of retired civil servants, and that's what they had to say. So there's going to be a proposed Eastern Rajasthan Canal project, and it is said to benefit 13 districts through interlinking of 3 rivers. And it has taken a political twist as neighboring Madhya Pradesh has approached the Supreme Court seeking a stay on this project's execution, and Rajasthan has also been demanding the national project status for this project. So you can see a view of the dried up Ramgarh Dam, which is near Jaipur, and it would be interlinking 3 rivers. So those 3 rivers are Parvati, Kali Sindh, and the Chambal rivers. And you can also understand through can understand all of them through map as well. Then so this is another new issue when we talk about interlinkage of the waters, and 2 states involved are Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh. So there is like Kundalia Dam, which is on the Kali Sindh River, and where then we have Mohanpura Dam on Nivaj River. So you need to find out that these rivers are tributaries of which parent river. So a Hyderabad-based company, it builds a simulated crew module for Gaganyaan, and the country's human spaceflight program, which is named as Gaganyaan, it has achieved a major milestone when the very first indigenous simulation crew module, which is built by Hyderabad-based Manjira machine builders, it was handed over to director of the Vikram Sarabhai Space Center. And apart from that, there are specifications which are not important for us. Coming to the editorial page, so India cannot be seen as dithering on issues of any nation's sovereignty. Now, like nearly 1 year to the date of the Russia's President Vladimir Putin's launch of the attacks on Ukraine, the UN General Assembly vote on the latest resolution to criticize Russia. It resulted in 141 votes in favor, 7 against. So obviously in against, one is Russia, and 32 absent. So in that, India and China were absent. So India and China did not vote. And resolutions are basically the resolution or the call for a just and lasting peace that was eventually sponsored by more than 70 countries, demanded an immediate cessation of the hostilities and appealed for accountability at the International Court for Rights Violations and War Crimes. So we are seeing that NATO countries, they are supporting Ukraine. So we are seeing a proxy war also going on. And India is obviously trying to balance. As of now, we are trying to balance between the Russia and the Western world. So India has proven over decades that it will not vote under duress, yet the global and the regional leadership that New Delhi claims cannot come from appearing diffident over the basic principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity. So as time passes by and this war completes 1 year, so there is, we can say, pressure building upon New Delhi to take either of the sides. And we're seeing cyber attacks are rising, but there is an ideal patch. So India's G20 presidentship and the summit later this year, there are ideal opportunities for crafting of a comprehensive domestic and the global cybersecurity framework. So we've seen that from the past few weeks, they have highlighted the soft underbelly of our fast expanding digital networks. And the first was the ransomware attack on the servers of the India's Premium Institute, that is AIMS. Nearly 40 million health records were compromised, and it took over 2 weeks for the system to be brought back online. And after that, soon a ransomware gang, which is called Black Cat, it breached the parent company of the Solar Industries Limited, which is one of the Ministry of Defense's ammunition and explosives manufacturers, and extracted over 2 terabyte of data. So critical, we can say, the critical data from the perspective of our national security, and obviously people's personal data from the AIMS servers, all of that was attacked. So we are seeing that cyber attacks, they are on the rise. So we are seeing that there is growing vulnerability at the same time, and ransomwares, they have emerged as the most predominant of the malicious cyber attacks. So here the perpetrators, in case of ransomwares, they demand hefty payments for the release of the withheld data. And data shows that over 75% of the Indian organizations, they have faced such attacks. So this number is really huge and concerning. And with each breach costing an average of around rupees 35 crores of damage. So with the lines between the physical and the digital realms blurring rapidly, we see that every critical infrastructure from transportation, power, and banking system would become extremely vulnerable to the assaults from the hostile state and the non-state actors. So this is also important from the perspective of internal security. So in 2022, the Indian Computer Emergency Response Team, which is also known as SORT-IN, it is India's cybersecurity agencies. It introduced a set of guidelines for the organizations to comply with when connected to the digital realm. So certain guidelines were issued, so you can read more about those guidelines. And this included the mandatory obligation to report the cyber attack incidents within hours of identifying them, and then designating a point person with domain knowledge to interact with certain. So India's draft Digital Personal Protection Bill 2022 proposes a penalty of up to rupees 500 crores for data breaches. And recently we saw that India's armed forces, it created a defense cyber agency, and which is capable of offensive and defensive maneuvers. So all Indian states, they have their own command, cyber command, and the control centers. And however, most organizations, they lack the tool to identify the cyber attacks, let alone prevent them. So at the infrastructural front, we are lacking. So most of our organizations, they are there in the private sector, and their participation remains limited in India's cybersecurity structures. And they would be advised to look at the Digital Geneva Convention, where over 30 global companies, they have signed a declaration to protect the users and customers from cyber breaches and collaborate with like-minded intergovernmental and state frameworks. So even global understanding over cyber attacks is essential. And so with most cyber attacks originating from beyond our borders, international cooperation would be critical to keep our digital space secure. And India has already signed the cybersecurity treaties, where the countries include United States, Russia, United Kingdom, South Korea, and the European Union. So even in multilateral frameworks such as Quad and I2U2, which obviously India is a member of, there are efforts to enhance cooperation in cyber incident responses, technology collaboration, capacity building, and in the improvement of cyber resilience. So over certain years, we are seeing that United Nations General Assembly, it has established two processes on the issues of security in the information and communication technologies environment. And one of them is the open-ended working group, which is comprising the entire UN membership, established through a resolution by Russia. And the other is the resolution by the US on continuation of the group of governmental experts, which comprises 25 countries. So, leveraging India's G20 presidentship, this year we'll see that basically India will be seeing participation by all the stakeholders driving the global levers of power. So this is a rare opportunity to bring together the domestic and the international engagement groups across the spectrum and stir the direction of these consultations. So in this picture, you can see the Chandrapur Plant, and this is the super thermal power station in Chandrapur, and it is a hulking 7-unit facility, and it has been blowing toxic substances for nearly 40 years. So breathing the toxic air of Chandrapur. So despite the Chandrapur super thermal power station facing several allegations of flouting the environmental norms and of knowingly and willingly damaging its immediate environment, it has barely faced any action. So the report, it is coming from India's most polluted cities on the dangers of slurry leaks and untreated coal waste and the effects of toxic substances on the population. So it is there in the state of Maharashtra, and so this is a detailed report. You can have a look. So there are, like, in the past also we've seen dangerous disasters, and so what is going to be the better way forward? So India produces almost 180 million metric tons of fly ash every year, and a significant fraction of it remains untreated and unrecycled. So the Indian government, it has issued various notifications on fly ash utilization. So you can find out where it can be utilized, and basically it is demanding, the notifications have been demanding beneficial reuse instead of all out disposal. So installation of the flue gas desulfurization units, then safe disposal of the fly ash. So India has recycled only around half of its fly ash, even as it generates more and more. So Vice President is saying that the member of parliament, they should exercise their right to speech responsibly. So words used in parliament cannot be based on unverified situations. And he reiterated that MPs should use the parliamentary privileges responsibly. So we have Article 105 in the Indian Constitution, which talks about the privileges to MPs, and you can read several clauses of it. So the Constitution has given this privilege to member of parliaments, but this privilege is not unqualified, and this privilege comes with very heavy responsibility, and that responsibility is every word spoken in parliament must be after due thought, after due consideration, and it cannot be based on unverified situations. So this is coming from our Vice President of India, who is also the ex officio chairman of Rajya Sabha. The Supreme Court says there is no gag on media on Adani Hindenburg reporting, and no injunctions will be passed against the media, says CGI, in a response to a plea filed by advocates seeking a gag order. So, no, there is no question of passing any injunction on the media, no gag on the media, and we will pass our order. We will do what we have to do. So obviously we've been also reading that Supreme Court is rather supporting more transparency in this whole issue. So we rather not accept the sealed cover suggestions from the government. And if we accept the government suggestions in a sealed cover, the other side, that is the petitioners, they will not be able to see them. So we want to maintain full transparency. So due to oversupply, we are seeing 1 in 3 trained pilots is without a job. And this is coming from the Directorate General of Civil Aviation's chief. And there are nearly 9,000 pilots currently employed with the Indian carriers. So like recently, we've been seeing that different airlines have placed orders for the aircrafts at huge numbers. So when we talk about the future expansion, so we are seeing that we see and we are expecting that the civil aviation sector is going to increase. So the job concerns should not remain there over a longer time period. But right now we are seeing there is an oversupply of trained pilots. So talking about the bird count of India, so it is an informal partnership of organizations and groups working together to increase the collective knowledge about the bird distributions and the populations. So it's an informal partnership of several organizations and groups. And recently one survey was like being done in West Bengal. So it is reported highest number of species of birds, followed by Uttarakhand and Arunachal Pradesh during the Great Backyard Bird Count 2023, which has taken place across 35 states and union territories. So this bird counting thing and exercise, it was launched in 1998, and the Bird Count India organizes this exercise and this bird count survey. So talking about MGNREGA, so we see that over 40% of the Gram Panchayats, they do not report the digital attendance. And activists, they say that low usage of the NMMS, which is a mobile app used for the attendance, recording the attendance of the MGNREGA workers, it shows there is a slowdown in the MGNREGA works. So they claim that government is using the technology as an excuse to put an end to this scheme, and that is through not recording their attendance digitally in this national mobile monitoring system. So you need to be aware about what are the other issues regarding this. And in this year's union budget also, we saw that the allocation for MGNREGA was drastically reduced. So that was again a concern. But again, the government says that we would be making the allocations as and when required as per the need. And apart from that, delayed wage payments is an issue. And we've already discussed this thing in a detailed manner from the perspective of the examination. And talking about COP28, and so it must focus on the adaptation instead of mitigation. So when we talk about climate change, we should now start focusing more upon adaptation, but also we can't say that we need to stop when it comes to mitigation exercises. So COP28, it is going to be there in Dubai, and the concepts of mitigation and adaptation are at the heart of the international climate discourse. So, adaptation refers to assisting the countries that are most vulnerable to the effects of climate change, specifically the coastal states and the island nations, with finance and the infrastructural assistance. And mitigation refers to reducing the carbon emissions, and historically countries have wrangled over the deadlines and the upper limit of emissions to keep the global temperatures from rising 0.5 degrees to, or we can say till 1 degree Celsius from the current levels. So FATF, that is the Financial Action Task Force, suspends the membership of Russia over the Ukraine invasion. And the FATF, it sets standards for more than 200 countries and jurisdictions and seeks to help the authorities tackle the serious crime, including drug smuggling, human trafficking, and terrorism. So Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, is saying that we are ready to do everything to defeat Russia. So both the sides are turning offensive, and US pledges to give $2 billion in weapons, and that is going to be an aid to Ukraine. So as Russia's invasion completes 1 year, the Pentagon says assistance includes Switchblade drones, electronic warfare detection equipment, and it promises to impose sanctions on over 200 Russians. Coming to the business page, the RBI Governor Shaktikant Das says there's uncertainty stays, but the global economic outlook, it is improving, because earlier, as we were expecting, there's going to be a recession. So that fear is not there as of now. And there is now greater optimism that the world may avoid a deep recession and only experience a slow growth or a softer recession. And so this is, we can say, one of the positive things at the global level. And there is now greater optimism, this we have discussed. So the International Monetary Fund had in January update of the World Economic Outlook, it has said. So you need to be aware that World Economic Outlook is published by IMF. So this said that although the global economy is poised to slow this year, but before rebounding next year, so the outlook is less gloomy than in its October forecast and could represent a turning point with growth bottoming out and inflation declining. But inflation is a concern for us right now, because in January we saw that numbers are again on the rise. So even in US, the consumer spending, it surged in January, but inflation rose. So that is a concern, and even the US Fed is saying that it might be possible that in the coming future, in the coming times, we might see one of the highest increase in their policy rates. So India-European Union Free Trade Pact is going to take a longer time, coming from our Union Minister. So he says that EU will take a longer time because there are 27 countries which have to come on the same page. And last year, India had signed the free trade agreements with Australia and the United Arab Emirates. So this is one of the ways through which we are trying to promote bilateral trade. So the NSE, that is the National Security Exchange Indices, unveils Municipal Bond Index. And NSE Indices is an arm of the NSE. So it said that it had introduced the country's first municipal bond index. So the Nifty India Municipal Bond Index will track the performance of municipal bonds which are issued by the Indian municipal corporations across maturities and having investment grade credit ratings for them. So NSE indices said this, and presently the index has 28 municipal bonds issued by 10 issuers, all having AA credit ratings. So the index constituents, they are assigned weights based on the outstanding amounts, and raising money from the capital markets incentivizes the municipal corporations to fund their new projects and improve their civic infrastructure while encouraging them to become financially disciplined and governance oriented. Coming to Financial Express. So India's day out at G20 meet, Prime Minister is saying the mandate is to restore the global growth and the stability. And basically, so he says that the G20 economy should draw inspiration from the vibrancy of the Indian economy and work towards bringing back the stability, confidence, and growth on the global landscape. So he says that as a set of challenges is faced by the world in the aftermath of the pandemic and amid persisting geopolitical tensions, including the unsustainable debt, inflation, and supply chain disruptions, I urge you to focus on most vulnerable people in the world. There are disruptions in the global supply chains. Food and energy security have become a major concern across the world. So he said that even the financial viability of many countries is threatened by unsustainable debt levels. So one of them is definitely Sri Lanka. Though India reported the public debt of 89.3% of the GDP in financial year 2022, it has already resumed the fiscal consolidation process and expects to mitigate the debt with higher GDP growth. And apart from that, an expert panel had earlier recommended that public debt must be maintained below 60% of the GDP. So even this is there in the FRBM Act of India. And the governor of RBI says that there's a need to address threats to the financial stability. So, calling for coordination aimed at strong and sustainable global economic growth, Reserve Bank of India's governor, he says that there is a need to address the threats to the financial stability, debt distress, climate finance, fractures in the global trade, and strains on the global value chains. So, as we were talking about the oversupply of the trained pilots. So after Jammu order, Air India is going to hire around 5,100 people in 2023. So at the job front, we can't say that there is much of concern. So talking about semiconductors in India, so 2 chip plants will be set up by this year's end. And we have received not less than 100 applications. By March, we are looking at having an ecosystem for almost 25 semiconductor design startups. So El Nino, as of now, it is at neutral levels and there would be clear picture by April. So this is coming from the IMD chief. And when we move towards the monsoon months, many models are suggesting development of El Nino this year. So these predictions are based on Jan to Feb data, considered not very good from the climatological perspective. And also from the past 3 years, we've been having La Nina, which is basically supports our monsoon, and we have more rainfall. So here you need to be like looking into other factors, which is the Indian Ocean dipole, and there is like Euro-Asian snow cover that impacts the monsoon performance. So a positive Indian Ocean dipole, which is currently at the neutral level, is good for the monsoon. So the warmer climate in Europe makes the monsoon in India strong as the temperature difference between land and sea is higher. So that is one thing. And so monsoon is crucial for the food grains production, as around 50% of the cropped areas in India are rain fed. So the monsoon rains, they replenish water reservoirs and they are crucial for irrigation. And higher food grains output ensures adequate availability in the market, and it curbs the possibility of a spike in prices of the commodities. Talking about digital economy, so the CEO of UIDAI says that I think the last 3 years of the pandemic have only strengthened the awareness among everyone of what the digital economy can help and how it can be so much more useful going ahead. So is it a crisis or a war? So G20 finance ministers, they differ on the Ukraine matter. And Sitaraman seeks efforts to bolster IMF and the World Bank. So as we were talking about the multilateral financial institutions, so these two are definitely one of the most important ones. So we need to take efforts to bolster these two institutions and flagging the rising debt vulnerabilities in many developing countries. She sought the G20 member nations coordination in managing the burden. Then the French finance minister says that we will oppose any step back from the declaration of the leaders in Bali, and we strongly condemn this brutal attack on Ukraine. So China is ambivalent on the relief to the debt-trapped countries. Apart from that, we are seeing that new institutions are needed for the climate action and the SDGs coming from Amitabh Kant. So the world needs new institutions to drive the climate action and sustainable development goals, as organizations such as IMF and the World Bank, they are not designed to address these challenges. And digital public infrastructure, transformational innovation. So that is one of the most transformational digital innovations which have emerged as an enabler of growth in many countries, including India. Coming from Economic Affairs Secretary, talking about the impact of the Ukraine invasion on the Indian economy on multiple fronts, but there is uncertainty far from over. So, understanding the impacts on the Indian economy, this is, I would say, one of the most important things from today's newspaper. So, we saw the supply chain disruptions and stock inflation. So, the blue one is the CPI inflation, green one is the CPI core inflation, and the pink one is the CPI food inflation. So all the three are on the rise, but okay, when we talk about the CPI core inflation, it has not fluctuated much, but other two have been on the rise since the start of this war. Then we are seeing weakening GDP and widening of our current account deficit. So GDP growth in percentage terms, it is going to be like earlier in financial year 2022, it was 8.7%, and we are expecting a 7% growth this financial year, basically in the upcoming financial year. And in terms of the gross value added growth, so even that is, we are expecting that would be slowing down to 6.7%. Talking about the current account balance in terms of percentage of the GDP, so we are seeing that it is on the rise. So you can see it is going more and more into the negative territory. So basically it is increasing, and minus is saying that we are importing more than what we are exporting. So it is right now, by the first two quarters of financial 2023, we expect that it was, sorry, it was like not expecting, but it was at minus 4.4%. Then talk about the India's basket of crude. So that is the cost in terms of dollars per barrel. So not fluctuated much, but we can say that it has increased from 75 mark up till $82.5 per barrel. Then FPI inflows in equity and in terms of debt, we are seeing, so the blue one is for equity. So it has been fluctuating a lot. You can see the level of volatility in equity inflows. And so majorly we saw that, okay, from here in this 2 to 3 months up till August 2022, we saw that it has sharply increased, but after that it has fluctuated a lot. And the orange one is for the debt inflow, so it has not fluctuated much, almost it is at the same level. And we saw a big spike in fertilizer subsidy and the market prices of urea and the DAP. So in terms of urea, you can see the fluctuation. In DAP also, there were significant fluctuations. So we are seeing that in terms of percentage change, there was 114% change in terms of the prices in fertilizer subsidy, and half of the DAP requirements met by the imports, and the muriate of the potash demand is met solely through the imports, and a fifth of the domestic urea requirements were met via imports. And monthly average of the wheat prices, so cereal inflation is definitely a concern for us. So from when we compare it from 1 year earlier, so for a few months initially when this war started, we saw that wheat prices, they increased massively at the 420 level, but right now they are at 273, which was almost the same that was 1 year ago. And food subsidy, it saw a huge jump As the wheat prices, they rose amid the global supply crunch, necessitating the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana extensions. So the food subsidy also increased by 39%, but when we talk about the spike in fertilizer subsidy, it was massive. So these were the multiple fronts we saw the impact of the Russia-Ukraine war on the Indian economy. So we saw our subsidy bill increasing, and in terms of equities, there was huge fluctuations. Apart from that, the current account deficit has been widening, and there was supply chain disruptions, and there was serial inflation. Coming to the editorial page, the opinion page. So, Union Minister for External Affairs says that just as a country has to fix its economic issues, a country has to fix its political issues too, and a country has to fix its social issues too. So, no country will ever come out of a difficult situation and become prosperous power if its basic industry is terrorism. So, there is a fundamental flaw there. Coming to Indian Express, again, we have talked about, you can see how people are fighting, they are like pulling each other's hair, and even like they were injured so much that they had to be taken to a hospital. So, this is not what we expect a democracy to look like, and highly disrespectful, no words for the situation. Let's come to editorial page. You can see the pictures, the policemen, how they are trying to save the people, but you can see how like it is not looking like that. It is a place where we are trying to strengthen our democracy. But what can be said, blow by blow, chaos, and in the MCD house yet again. And the councillors are seen hitting each other, slapping and shoving each other. So why is the standing committee important in this whole issue? So while the mayor is the nominal head of the civic body, it is the 18-member standing committee which has the executive powers, and the mayor's powers, they are limited to calling special meetings of the house, declaring quorum for the house to convene the sittings, and disqualifying the members if they do not furnish the details of the assets. So powers to grant the financial approval to the projects, then appoint subcommittees and form the regulations, discussions related to and finalization of the policies to be implemented are under the ambit of the standing committee. So this is very important for you to remember the distinction between their powers. So mayor is it is like merely a nominal head of the civic body. So Lok Sabha Speaker says that unparliamentary behavior and undesirable words, they erode the faith in democracy, and disruptions during the parliamentary proceedings and the use of undesirable words in the political discourse will erode people's faith in democratic institutions and would ultimately weaken their democracy. So he also warned that debates on the floor of the House should not be a forum to raise allegations and counter allegations. So there can be differing opinions on policy decisions, but there have been concerns whether the floor of legislative bodies are for allegations and counter allegations. Even if there is an allegation, it should be raised following procedures, through obviously following the procedures and the rules that are there. So reducing the army presence in Jammu and Kashmir is the right step. It must be done in a gradual and a phased manner. Obviously, this should not be sudden, and there is merit in the government's proposal that normalcy must be accompanied by a reduction in the force levels for the army deployed for counter-terror operations in Jammu and Kashmir, and this would also come as a relief to the army saddled with manpower cuts, even as its operational commitments they have increased. So, however, the gains in Jammu and Kashmir they have come at great cost, and it would be sensible to err on the side of caution and conduct the pull out of the army in a graduated and a phased manner. So we are seeing that again, violence in the state of Punjab specifically. There is whole issue regarding Khalistan. So the state has no appetite for a return to the violent 80s. So in the 1980s, we saw there was Operation Blue Star and how different personalities they influenced the situation in Punjab. So the government must not yield space to the radical elements. So the capitulation of the Punjab government to a radical Sikh leader who openly declares that he follows in the path of Jarnail Singh Bhindrawale, the Khalistani preacher he was killed during this Operation Blue Star, does not augur well for the state. So unlike in Delhi, the ruling Aam Aadmi Party, which is there in Punjab, has control over every instrument of the government to preserve the law and order. Bafflingly, it surrendered to an armed mob that stormed a police station in Ajnala, demanding the release of a man arrested in a kidnapping case. So, this was the situation there, and senior police officials they gave in to the demand during the negotiations with the mob, led one by Amritpal Singh. So that person was released, and so Amritpal Singh, who heads an organization which is called the Varis Punjab Day, and it was set up by the controversial Deep Sidhu. So the government's failure to enforce the rule of law can only embolden these elements who want to create unrest and chaos in Punjab in order to breathe life into a discredited secessionist movement. And the sudden rise of Amritpal Singh is both mysterious and ominous. Said to be a truck driver in Dubai, the man at the center of this fracas arrived in Punjab dressed like Bhindrawale after Sidhu's death and took over the reins of this organization. And he has managed to gather a following since then with his radical talks. So the center, sharp to spot a Khalistani threat on distant shores, has been surprisingly easygoing about Singh, even after he issued an apparent death threat to the Union Home Minister Amit Shah. So the state and the center, they must put aside their differences and stand together to send out a strong message that anyone who dreams of returning Punjab to the 1980s will be dealt with under the relevant laws. Again, this article is also talking about the violence at Ajnala, and mob violence brings back worrying memories of the militancy that was there in the state of Punjab, and the government must act. So, and this incident, it comes at a time when the chief minister is locked in a standoff with the governor who declined permission for the budget session on Thursday. So the two have been involved in a war of words, each accusing the other of overreaching his constitutional jurisdiction. So there is another issue which is going on between the chief minister and the governor of the state. And however, but these volatile elements should not be allowed to nurture in the state. So G7 countries, they unveil new sanctions on Russia, and in Ukraine there is grief and resolve to fight. So here, from the perspective of the examination, firstly, it is important for all of us to understand the geography of this region. You should be knowing that which all countries border Ukraine, and then Russia shares borders with which all countries in Eastern Europe. So that is important. Apart from that, different water bodies, which is located around their surroundings, that is Black Sea and Sea of Azov, which is important. There is Caspian Sea also, which becomes important because of this war. So coming to the explain section, let's have a look what is important for us to discuss from here. So section 153A, its use and misuse. So Congress leader Pawan Khera has been booked under IPC sections including 153A, 505 and 295A. So what do these sections say, and how have they been used, and what has the Supreme Court said on them? So Supreme Court on Thursday, it granted interim bail to Pawan Khera. So firstly, here you should be clear with what do we mean by interim bail and what are other types of bail which are there. So he's the chairman of the Media and Publicity Department of the All India Congress Committee, and who had been arrested for alleged hate speech by Assam police. And multiple FIRs were registered against him across different states, mentioned the offenses ranging from the criminal conspiracy, imputations, assertions, and prejudicial to the national integration to promoting enmity between religions. So what the law says, so section 153 of IPC penalizes promoting enmity between different groups on grounds of religion, race, place of birth, residence, language, and etc., and doing acts prejudicial to maintenance of harmony. So this is what section 153A of IPC talks about, and this is punishable with imprisonment up to 3 years or with a fine or with both. So this provision was enacted in 1898, and it was not in the original penal code. So at the time of the amendment, promoting class hatred was a part of the English law of sedition, but it was not included in the Indian law. So along with this section 153A, we have section 505, which penalizes statements conducing to public mischief, was also introduced, and that is there. So the FIR against him also mentioned section 153B, which is making imputations, assertions prejudicial to the national integration. There was section 295A, which is regarding deliberate and malicious acts intended to outrage the religious feelings of any class by insulting its religion or religious beliefs. Section 500 is there for defamation. 504 is for intentional insult with intent to provoke breach of peace. So hate speech laws, they have been invoked under regimes of all parties to crack down on criticisms of the public functionaries and to arrest the individuals. Last year, we saw Marathi actor was arrested for a Facebook post allegedly defaming the NCP leader Sharad Pawar. She was booked under the same provisions in as many as 22 FIRs. And data from the National Crime Records Bureau shows that the rate of conviction for Section 153A is very low. So that is one area of concern. And So safeguards against the misuse. So given that the provisions, they are worded broadly, there are safeguards against its misuse. For example, Section 153A and 153B, they require prior sanction from the government for initiating the prosecution. But this is required before the trial begins and not at the stage of the preliminary investigation. So this is one of the safeguards which is there, that you need the sanction of the government. So in 2021 ruling, the Supreme Court said that the state will have to prove intent for securing a conviction under Section 153A. So the state will have to prove the intent for securing a conviction. And Supreme Court in this case, it caused an FIR which was against the editor of the Shillong Times, registered for allegedly creating communal disharmony through a Facebook post. So the intention to cause the disorder or incite people to violence is the sine qua non of the offense under Section 153A of IPC, and prosecution have to prove the existence of mens rea in order to succeed. So here in this picture, you can have a look. Amrinder Singh and Lovepreet Singh Tofen at Golden Temple on Friday evening. So we've talked about the whole issue which is going on there in Punjab and the violence, and how a person was released by mob violence after negotiations with the police. So situation is volatile as of now in some areas of Punjab. We've already looked into all these things in the Hindu newspaper. So that's all. Thank you for joining Ansarkari. I hope you have understood the key things, and you'll be getting the PDF link also in the description box. So definitely go through that. Apart from that, do not forget to subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and please share this video as much as possible. Thank you so much for joining us today.